Nhaca. I was born in Mozambique, 1987. Then my mom got married to not my biological father, someone who eventually became the dad that raised me, but he's not my biological father. And from there, I migrated to South Africa in 1996. And through studying, through different challenges that I went through, I started becoming interested in human behavior. And eventually, I started my own business, a consulting company that specializes in human behavior, especially around mental and emotional mastery. And this then led me to be certified in what is called the DiMartini method, which is what I would use to help a client in mastering their emotions and their perceptions. And yeah, it's work that has led me to study a lot of things, things I never thought that I would be able to master myself, but it has been quite an interesting journey and a really grateful one at that as well. Yes.
So do you work with the emotions and finances? Where does the finance part come in?
Or where does the finance part come in? So when it comes to finances, I always say that in all the studies that I've found so far, and this is reading books on finance, as well as studying people that have built vast amounts of wealth, from John D. Rockefeller to Bill Gates, even himself right now, is there's a component where you find that they had emotional mastery over themselves. They would go above emotions in making financial decisions. And most of the time, people who don't build wealth to that magnitude, they make emotional decisions. They make a financial decision based on the emotion of either I'm feeling good or I'm feeling bad. And that has to do a lot with what the person has gone through throughout their whole life. And that's where the two come into place, the emotion and the finance aspects of things.
In your experience, do you find that men are emotional? Are they good with their emotions or not? Or what's your experience with men and emotions, just in general?
What's my experience with men and the emotions, and are they good with emotions and dealing with money? It will depend on where the man is emotionally. So let me make this example. For instance, if my void when I was younger has been the fact that I perceive that money has been what's missing, chances are when I grow up, because the void was one of the biggest things, is if I want to fill that void, I'm going to seek money because that's what I perceive is most missing. But if I perceive that money is not the thing that's most missing, I'm going to go and search for the thing that was most missing. So for example, if I perceive that I was 14 years old and I got rejected by different types of girls and my self-confidence wasn't very high, and I continue to have that void, by the time I turn 25 and I get a good working job, because I perceive that the void is I didn't get enough girls when I was 14, if I'm looking to fill that void, I'm obviously going to take money and use it towards that direction to fill that void. I'm going to spend money on dates, I'm going to spend money on good clothes, and that will be the emotional drive behind that. So when it comes to men, that will be the void, is what void is the man seeking to fill. If it's an emotional based void, then the man will be emotionally driven to fill that specific void.
And where do you find that most men learn lessons about money and finance?
Where do most men learn lessons about money and finance? They normally learn in the house, in the family. Is they learn that, okay, my dad worked from 8 in the morning until late at night. In between, I never saw my dad. And because I never saw my dad, I had to go to school. And learning in school, the person who's teaching me about money is the person who is not in a business. So that then becomes my father figure. And when I get home, my father, who might even be running a business, he doesn't teach me those lessons when it comes to money. And then I start to pick up all the habits that are around me, the friends that I get to make. Those are where most men get their lessons when it comes to money, either from a teacher who they hold on a pedestal to be the person that's leading them, and the friends that they then surround themselves with, and especially at home. And I really love that question. So the first start and the first principle of learning about money actually starts in the house. It starts with, what are the conversations that are happening with my parents? Are they fighting about not having enough money? Are they perhaps saying there's not enough money for us to go on a trip? What is the conversation that's based around in the house when it comes to money? So it will start from the house. So where do most men learn about money? Most men learn about money at home. It first starts as a foundation is at home, because the first people you're dependent on is the people that are raising you. It could be an aunt, could be an uncle, but your first reference of a survival mechanism is the people that are raising you. Those are the people that have that control and that power over you. And I think one of the psychologists was Kohlberg, where he had the 4 moral developments of a child, where the first point is the parents. They listen to the parents because those are the people that spend majority of the time with the child. And then the child then progresses to listening to the teachers. And the teachers, you learn from them. And that then becomes your 2 foundations that you have going on through life. And it's amazing where even Dr. John DeMartini, which is a mentor of mine, he even found that the moment a person starts a business, everything that the teacher taught them in school goes out the window, because he's no longer playing by those rules. And most men get stuck in, this is what my teacher taught me, and this is what I got taught at home. And then we carry those 2 foundations forward in making financial decisions.
And then what about the family?
Yes. You said, what about the family?
Where does the family fit in terms of finances?
Okay, where does the family fit in terms of finances? If we look at the family, is the father normally has an idea of what he wants the son to become. Maybe he says that, okay, I'm living in 1960, and in 1960, the career that pays the most is perhaps being an accountant. So the father has the perception that if I'm an accountant, or if my son becomes an accountant, he's going to be a very highly paid professional. Then 20 years later, when his son now is making decisions, is now 1980, and the economic environment has changed. So the father can influence the child to make a decision to become an accountant, although becoming an accountant is not financially viable for the child. Yes, it was economically viable 20 years before, but I can put that pressure because I'm the one who's paying for your schooling, therefore you have to go and study accounting. Then the child grows up to say, okay, I want to become an accountant. He becomes the accountant, but he still has that void. He still hasn't found himself. So he uses the money to make up for that void that he has, which means that he hasn't found himself. And then he goes back to making those emotional decisions around, let me buy something for me to feel good. And that also stems from a foundation of teaching from the parents.
What should be the conversations about money from home? What should a father be doing?
Okay, what should a father be doing? That's a very interesting question. One book I highly recommend is Family Wealth. Family Wealth is such an excellent book when it comes to building generational wealth. But there's certain aspects in there that we can also use in our day-to-day conversations with our sons when it comes to building wealth. In that it says that the greatest capital in a family is actually the human capital. It's not the money aspect of it. It's what the human brings forth. So the first foundation to have a conversation with the child is to first understand what the child is. Where is the child psychologically strong in? If the child is psychologically strong in, for example, sports, there's a financial future around sports. If you look deep enough, there's so many careers that have to do with sports. And you first find that, okay, the child is psychologically strong in sports. How do we make the child so good in sports? It doesn't matter whether it's playing the sports or maybe becoming an analyst in sports. Bring that out in the child and turn that into an economic opportunity. That's where it first starts, is by first understanding the child's strength, not the strengths that you will pick up in the world to say, okay, I believe that becoming the accountant, like I said before, is the most economically viable thing to do. But you take the child, you put him in an environment to become an accountant, but he's not psychologically strong in that area. So the first point to start is to actually start and ask, where is my child better than anybody else? What are the fields that my child is the most proficient in?
And do you think then, what's your opinion then on fatherless homes, and how would a single mother answer that question?
Yes. So how would a single mother answer the question of my child becoming economically strong, or where is my child best suited in the world?
Both.
Both. Okay. That works for anybody. And women tend to understand human behavior much better. I find that women tend to be a bit more patient when it comes to raising a child. My personal story is when I matriculated, one of the first people to actually approach me was my mother. She said, listen, your dad wants to take you to school, but I believe that where you are as a person is you need to learn these skills of becoming independent. So my advice is, you can accept to go to school where your dad can pay for you to go to university, but my advice is you learn, you go get a job, and if you want to go to school, pay for your own schooling and see what it is that you want to study. And of course I took that advice because she understood the type of person that I am and what life lessons I needed. So from a woman's perspective is, I would say, do not be scared to give your child responsibility. And this is also where the foundation of raising a child comes, where if you don't give the child enough responsibilities, later on in life, that also has the psychological problem of, okay, someone must make decisions for me. So as a mother, is respect the child enough and understand where the child is and help the child to make decisions by themselves. Because I even see there's a growing trend. I don't know if this is a growing trend, I won't say that per se, but when I was growing up, I never took my homework to my parents. I never told my parents, listen, this is the homework that I have, let's do it. Yes, they would help me, but the next day it wouldn't be, oh, my parents done the homework for me. But now the trend is that you start to pick up now in society is, oh, my children has a lot of homework. So that tells me that you're now doing the child's homework. You're not letting the child fail, go back to school, get maybe 6 out of 100 and learn why they got 6 out of 100. Maybe there's something that they didn't understand in the classroom. So I would say, if you're a single mother and you're raising a boy, try to make the boy as independent as quickly as possible.
Do you think then there is some benefit to facing challenges and adversity when it comes to finances? Do you think it's better if somebody starts off in a family that is well off, or where somebody struggles? What do you think about just adversity and people developing skills to make money or be economically strong?
Well, that's a very good question. I believe in the challenge. The challenge is what sets the child apart. Let's study Warren Buffett. If we study Warren Buffett, by the age of 11, he had read every single book on economics in his local library. Where that started from, his father was a financial broker as well. So he wanted to be like his father at that age. And the parents understood him. So what did they do? They put him in a situation where he was reading all the books on economics. So they challenged him enough to read in that area. Then I think by the age of 15, he had already done his taxes. So he was at that age already making financial decisions for himself. And it's the challenge that he had when he was small. And one of the lessons that when you read his biography, he even asked his father is, Dad, how come you don't pay me to take out the dustbin like the rest of the kids, of the neighborhood kids? And his father told him that I pay you to read books because you reading a book will give you that step ahead, because I don't want to teach you how to be an employee, to work for something and get something in return, to be duty driven. Instead, I want to teach you how money works. And by you knowing how money works, that puts you in a better position to know, okay, this is what I need to do to make money work for me. So I think it's beneficial to give the child enough challenges, because you're already supporting the child by feeding the child at home. The child comes home every day, there's dinner, there's everything that the child wants in terms of the survival of the child. But outside of that, what are the extra challenges that the child has? And you find that the greatest leaders are the ones who had the most challenging childhoods. So I think there's a direct correlation with having a lot of challenges, especially financially, for a child when they're young, in terms of challenging them to think of money in a different way.
Do you think that there could be too many challenges? Like when you think of a country like South Africa,
Yes.
violence in the home, the economy, and do you think there are situations, if you can talk a little bit about that, situations that really make it difficult for a child to grow up well and balanced in terms of finances and things like that?
So when you say, is there a challenge for the child to grow up financially well?
Yeah. Are there challenges that unpreferable?
Yeah, okay. So unpreferable challenges.
Unpreferable family circumstances. If you say to somebody, we need to change this in the household because this is going to affect the child. Either parents fighting or...
You see, and that's the thing is, that again, I'm going to come from a perspective of there's nothing that's on the way to something. In that there was a reason why there was a fight in the house. And you could carry that. But it's all about learning to overcome those things. If your parents are fighting about money, there's obviously a lesson in there to be learned. And again, I'm coming from a perspective of how do I use this to benefit me? Of course, there was a miscommunication with the parents. That's why they argued about money. Maybe there was not enough money in the house. The mom wanted to take money in a specific direction. The dad wanted to take the money in a specific direction. So they are facing their own challenges as parents. Then the aspect of the child being separated from that problem comes into place. This is where the child needs to be taught from early age that not everything is going to be happy from the parent's perspective. And that if I'm arguing with your mom, the problem is me and your mom. It's not with you. And this is where I think we then need to start teaching the children that there's a difference if there's a fight that's going on here and when there's something that's going on between me and you and the child. And I think that's where the underlying challenge needs to come, where we need to start separating the challenges of this is my challenge and these are my parents' challenges. Because once I integrate my parents' challenges and make those mine, I'm already at a disadvantage. Because what I'm saying is, I'm my father, whereas I'm different from my father and I'm separate from my father. How would I train my child around finances at home?
Yeah.
I would do the most simple things, such as we're parents and we get busy. And around the house, there's all these things that can be delegated. So what I would do is I would use ordinary tasks that I want to get delegated. And I would use those as a financial opportunity for the kids. I think if you study B.F. Skinner's work around giving reward for specific behaviors, is you can actually incorporate this into everyday life. Where if you have the need to do dishes, you allocate to say, okay, for doing dishes, it's 50 Rand. Every time you do dishes, I'll pay you 50 Rand, or you have a monthly salary that comes into play, where they know that, okay, money just doesn't come, is I have to do something for the money. I would start there to know that, okay, there's reward for doing something. And the second lesson would actually be around teaching the child about savings and or delayed gratification, as you would have it, is take the money, put it somewhere, put it into a jar, put it into a bank account, and then show the child to say, okay, the 50 rand that you earned last month, January, is here's the 50 rand, it's in the bank account, this is what is happening to it. And here's percentage. If it's a 4% growth, you teach the child to say, here's the 4% that your money grew by. Now, if you add more money to it, if you put in an extra 50 rand, your money will grow more by an extra percentage. So you're already teaching them mathematics, but with things that they're already doing. So you're already teaching them about interest, compound interest, and about saving. And the longer the money stays there, it will also grow. And the third thing that I will also teach the child is, every time you take the child shopping, a simple thing is, if you just take the child shopping and you say you can have whatever you want in the shop, and what's likely to happen? The child is more likely to just go in and buy 10 things and just say, okay, mommy, I want these 10 things. Now you're forced to buy those 10 things, or the child throws a tantrum. But if you take the child, or if you take 200 rand, for example, and then you tell the child that, listen, with this 200 rand, this is how you've earned the right to spend this 200 rand. You've done well at school, you've learned how to behave at home, you've learned how to get along. And out of this 200 rand, there's only specific items that you can get. The child's mind then starts thinking of, okay, I only have 200 rand. I've earned the 200 rand, I've got the right to spend 200 rand. Then they start making financial decisions of, okay, what are the things that I mostly need, that are mostly important to me right now? And what are the things that I do not need? And then they are now start buying according to that. And guaranteed they'll actually have some money left, because now they're spending according to priority. And that then teaches the child that you spend according to priority, not according to what's in the moment or what you feel the impulse to buy. So those are the three lessons that I would teach a child. Is first, teach the child the power of earning, is give them tasks. Because by you delegating stuff to the children, you also have more free time. Is give them tasks and pay them for the task. The second thing is teach them the concept of saving, of putting money away, and at a later stage, this is how much money you'd get. And the third thing is teach the child to spend according to priority. Every time the child goes to the shop, allocate money for them, to say this is the only money that you can spend, and this is how you've earned the right to spend the money. So what are the incorrect things that we get taught about money? Is the number one myth is that money can only be earned in a specific way. What I mean by that is, you often hear there's not enough money to go around. There's only money in a specific type of industry. And that's just a myth, because if you study finances, you find that there's a potential for wealth everywhere you go. Even if you look at collecting rubbish, for example, there's a $1 billion industry in collecting rubbish. It just depends on where in the game you're actually playing. So that myth that there's only money to be made in a specific area, that's the first myth that I'd actually say is untrue. Because if you believe in that myth, then you're believing that I can't be myself and earn money. Whereas there's different ways of earning money. If you look at every single industry, I guarantee you that there's someone who's made $1 billion in that industry. It doesn't matter what it is, from shoes to fashion to even glasses. There's someone who's made millions in that. But they've cared enough about humanity to actually go out and be paid to do that. So the number one myth is that. And the second myth, I would say that it's the myth that we live in, that you can't get paid to do what you love. I believe that that myth it keeps you from being your unique self, finding out what your unique self is to contribute to the world and get paid for that. And the other myth that I've also discovered when it comes to finances is people think that there's good and evil when it comes to money. That if you have 10 million, you're a specific type of person. Then when you have 10 rand, you're a specific type of person. That myth actually keeps you from growing outside of your realm. And those are just social labels. Again, when you live according to someone else's worldview of what money is and what finances is, you're always going to be boxed in terms of what you can earn and what your potential earning is, because you're living according to what someone else believes finance is. And the other myth that I would say that also comes to money is that there's never enough money to save. Most of the time people say, okay, I don't have enough money to save. All my money goes away. But during my consults, when it comes to people who have that myth or that perception that there's never enough money to save, is what we find is that those are the people that are paying other people first instead of themselves. So they will draw up a budget of how much they are going to spend of the money that they're going to be earning. Whereas if you reverse that and actually start saying, before you draw up the budget, how much money are you going to keep? Because when someone draws up a budget, they say, I want to save out of the 5,000 rand that I spent last month on groceries. Let me see if I can perhaps save 4,000 rand this month, and therefore I will save 1,000 rand. But the question is, where is that 1,000 rand going? So you put in that 1,000 rand at the end of the spectrum and not in the beginning of the spectrum. Whereas if you have that money saved up first and then spend, the money is already there. And I don't believe that a working person never has enough money to spend. It's just according to priorities, is who are they prioritizing in their money? And the moment you start to prioritize other people instead of yourself, that money is not there. And the other myth is that debtors need to be paid first. That myth, I don't believe in that myth, because that myth again has a psychological disadvantage to you to say that everyone else comes first. And those are my myths that I believe that come up when it comes to money, where people believe that money is evil, but money is neither a good or a bad thing. It's just a representation of someone. If someone earns 10 billion, he's not different from someone who earns 10 million. It's just that the person who's at 10 billion and someone who's at 10 million is just operating in two different strategies. The 10 billion person perhaps has a bigger vision than the person who's earning 10 million and the person who's then earning 10,000 rand. It's just different levels of existing, but they are essentially human beings. It's just they're just operating differently with different types of strategies. If anything, the more money you earn, the more responsible you have to become. And that's what I find with money, is it's correlated to the responsibility levels that you have. Bill Gates' responsibility level with the kind of money that he's handling is different from mine, because of the different social responsibilities that he has with his money versus my one as well. And I believe that the more you earn, the more responsibility it is that you actually have.
What about, so we live in a country where there's a lot of socialism, anti-business, anti-property, even the world in the US now, part of the elections, you hear this story about capitalism and people who have money have wronged the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so to accumulate and to, that's wrong, we need to share. What do you think about socialistic, for a young man growing up in a world like that, how should they manage their own thoughts?
Okay, and that's a very good question. So in a socialistic society, a person should have their own visions, I believe. Is that the more people understand themselves and how the universe works and what laws govern the universe, you'll realize that not everybody can be a CEO. You need different types of operations of human beings for society to work. You can't have 10 CEOs within a company. You can't have 100 CEOs within a company. Then the company wouldn't function. It wouldn't function as effectively as it's supposed to have. And the other thing to understand is that there's leadership in every level of existence within a company. because a CEO is making decisions that have to do with 100 years from now. It's not an easy task. So this myth that all rich people have wronged the world, but if you look closely, is they've served the world. I make an example of Microsoft. What have you used today that has to do with Microsoft? You probably have used Word, you have used Excel, you have used, perhaps you used Skype for business, but it's built in Microsoft. And his vision was to fill every house with a computer, and that has changed your life. So with that being said about all rich people are evil, they've wronged the world somewhat, I can't agree to that, because they have served the world, they have pushed humanity forward. And if you look at it, they have served more than they've done wrong in terms of that aspect. Is yes, there might have been some things in between that some people don't agree with. Maybe perhaps you should have spent more money in getting rid of poverty. But again, that's someone else's view of where money should be spent. Money in itself has no value. It's us who put a morality value into it. Then the question is, the person who thinks that the money should be spent in getting rid of poverty, again, let's then go ask the question to those people is, why is it that you haven't put yourself in the position to make enough money to eradicate poverty? Because on the other spectrum of money making is there's jobs that have been created in between. There's families who've been impacted, whose lives have changed. I always say that there's always a job behind every villain. If you really, really look closely, a villain has actually created jobs. I mean, if you look at how news works, we all love news of a villain. For example, let me make an example of a president that we had, Jacob Zuma. He was in the media every 2 days. Although we painted him as a villain, how many people have actually got jobs from news reporting about that? Although he's a villain, if you look very, very closely, there's people who've actually benefited out of him being a villain. And you find this in different industries, where you find even now, in the case of the R. Kelly case, you find that there's someone who went out and documented that, and they even had a premiere on that. So there is a financial aspect of that. Although yes, he's helping he's helping the people come out and speak their truth, but there's also a financial reward system that's also there. So you can never run away from the financial aspects of things. It's just a matter of, do you value enough of what you're doing to actually put a monetary value on it? And you find that people who don't value enough of it judge the people that do.
Okay.
So the black tax thing is, actually ask yourself is, what are the downsides to you supporting someone? Because you could be overly infatuated with the outside of, my mother sees me being a responsible person, or my uncle sees that I'm now becoming a man. Is ask yourself, what are actually the downsides of you actually supporting someone? Not only to them, but also to yourself. Is the downside of, okay, I now have to take money out of my immediate family to support somebody else. Is just go through the whole exercise of asking what are the downsides and actually present that to the other person. And guaranteed, once you see the other side, where you don't become overly infatuated with the other person, then you start to free yourself up. Because it's all about infatuations of things. Is you're putting someone on a pedestal thinking they have something that you don't, and because you're down here, you're trying to now get the person's respect. In most cases, you find that I'm trying to get that person's respect. That's why I must give that person money and take from myself to give to the outsource of my pain, which is the person they believe has the power over me. So it's to ask yourself, what is actually the downside of giving that person money? So you equilibrate and become centered in your finances. Finances is all about emotions, and emotions come into play in different angles. Someone who's feeling down about finances, they've been retrenched, they don't have a job, they are told that you're worthless, and at this point in time, they don't see a thing out. The one question that I would always ask is, what do I have within me and around me to be of service to other people that someone is willing to pay for. And I attended a talk by a men's conference, Majita's Let's Talk, and the gentleman gave a pure description of what power is. And in power, he had the word W, which is worth. And he said something so powerful that if you're not working, see if you can go do the neighbor's garden and have a financial price on that. Just see what is around you, what are the resources that are around you that you can use to your benefit. So that's the question that I would ask is, what else do I have within me and the resources around me that could benefit the next human being and that I could put an economical value in it? And this again even goes to the person who's working at a job who feels that they don't earn enough. There's something that they have that could get them to the next income bracket, and it's about asking that question. What else do I have within me that could benefit the next human being and put a monetary value on that? And that's my advice, is to ask that question and don't stop until you answer that question enough times. So when it comes to money, I always follow Warren Buffett's quote that don't expect to handle money until you've learned to handle your emotions. And unless you've equilibrated the hurts in your past, don't expect to be able to handle money, because all the hurts and all these emotional imbalances that are in your life, unless you learn to balance them out and equilibrate them, they could be running you in your subconscious mind. So my advice, the biggest thing that you can ever do for yourself is to actually equilibrate and balance out your emotional misperceptions that you have of either sides, of good and bad, and of people that you've put on a pedestal and of people that you've actually put down. Is balance out the emotional equilibrations that you have in when it comes to finances.